At the ground level of greenhouse gases, as income rises, people increasingly spend their money on outdoor air conditioning and other energy-intensive technology, thus contributing to global warming. Rising population is another prime contributor. Had population not changed since 1950, carbon emissions will now be 40% of their current level. Of course, the world community will not be reducing the population or striving to cap prosperity. Instead, it has focused on getting the national agreement to lower emissions. The latest effort in this direction, the Kyoto Protocol, those national targets for emission reduction. The Kyoto process, however, is in trouble because not all countries, notably the US, will ratify. Other reforms, such as the US movement to impose higher mileage standards on sport utility vehicles and the European Union to levy a tax on energy, have floundered. Now, a quick and sure way to slow global warming is to arrange a relative revolution, like the one occurring in Eastern Europe after the breakup of the Soviet Empire. Such distinction results in steep decline in carbon dioxide emission in the region. This episode illustrates that prosperity is the driving force behind the growing level of greenhouse gases. As income rises, people increasingly spend their money on outdoors, air conditioning, and other energy-intensive technologies, thus contributing to global warming. Rising population is another prime contributor. Had population not changed since 1950s, carbon emissions would now be 40% of their current level. Of course, the world community will not be reducing the population or striving to cap prosperity. Instead, it has focused on getting international agreement to lower emissions. The latest effort in this direction, the Kyoto Protocol, will set legal binding national targets for emission reductions. The Kyoto process, however, is in trouble because not all countries, notably the US, will ratify it. Therefore, such as the US movement to impose higher mileage standards on sport utility vehicles and the European Union plan.あいやー、聞き取りやすいな。A quick and sure way to slow global warming is to arrange a really deep depression, like the one occurring in Eastern Europe after the breakup of the Soviet Empire. Such distinction is a quick and sure way to slow global warming is to arrange a really deep depression, like the one that occurred in Eastern Europe after the breakup of the Soviet Empire. Such disintegration resulted in a steep decline in carbon dioxide emission in the region. This episode illustrates that prosperity is a driving force behind the growing level of greenhouse gases. As income rises, people increasingly spend their money on outdoors, air conditioning, and other energy-intensive technologies, thus contributing to global warming. Rising population is another prime contributor. Had population not changed since 1950, carbon emissions will now be 40% of their current level. Of course, the world community will not be reducing the population or striving to cap prosperity. Instead, it has focused on getting international agreement to lower emissions. The latest effort in this direction, the Kyoto Protocol, will set regular binding national targets for emission reduction. The Kyoto process, however, is in trouble because not all countries, notably the US, will ratify it. But not all countries, notably the US, will ratify it. Will ratify it. His actions. The Kyoto process, however, is in trouble because not all countries, notably the US, will ratify it. Other efforts, such as the U.S. movement to impose higher mileage standards on sport utility vehicles and the European Union plan to levy tax on energy, have founded, founded, have founded mileage standards on sport utility vehicles and the European Union plan to levy a tax on energy, have founded, have founded. A quick and sure way to slow global warming is to arrange a really deep depression, like the one occurring in Eastern Europe after the breakup of Otto. A quick and sure way to slow global warming is to arrange a really deep depression, like a wonder, one, oh, like the wonder curd, wonder curd, like the wonder curd like the one that occurred in Eastern Europe, like the one that occurred range clearly one that occurred in Eastern Europe. A quick and sure way to slow global warming is to arrange a really deep depression, like the one that occurred in Eastern Europe after the breakup of the Soviet Empire. Such distinction resulted in steep decline in carbon dioxide emissions in the region. This episode illustrates the prosperity as a driving force behind the growing level of greenhouse gases. As income rises, people increasingly spend their money on outdoors, air conditioning, and other energy-intensive technology, thus contributing to global warming. Rising population is another prime contributor. Had population not changed since 1950, carbon emissions would now be 40% of the current level. Of course, the world community will not be reducing the population or starving to cap prosperity. Instead, it has focused on getting international agreement to lower emissions. The latest effort in this direction, the Kyoto Protocol, is a legally binding national target for emission reduction. The Kyoto process, however, is in trouble because not all countries, notably the US, will ratify it. Other efforts, such as the US movement to impose higher mileage standards on sport utility vehicles and the European Union plan to levy a tax on energy, have floundered. もたつくまごつく A quick and sure way to slow global warming is to arrange a really deep depression, like the one that occurred, like the one that occurred, like the one that occurred. Number 18. A quick and sure way to slow global warming is to arrange a really deep depression, like the one that occurred in Eastern Europe after the break of the Soviet Empire. Such disintegration resulted in oh, すまねえ carbon dioxide emissions in the region after the break of the Soviet Empire. Such disintegration resulted in such disintegration in Europe after the break of the Soviet Empire. Such disintegration resulted in a steep decline in carbon dioxide emissions in the region. This episode illustrates the prosperity as a driving force behind the growing level of greenhouse gases. As income rises, people increasingly spend their money on outdoor air conditioning and other energy-intensive technology, thus contributing to global warming. Rising population is another prime contributor. Had population changed since 1950, Carbon emissions will now be 40% of their current level. Of course, the world community will not be reducing the population or striving to cap prosperity. Instead, it has focused on getting international agreement to lower emissions. The latest effort in this direction, the Kyoto Protocol, will set, will set, will set getting international agreement to lower emissions. Will set legally binding, will set, will set legally binding national and getting an international agreement to lower emissions. The latest effort in this direction, the Kyoto Protocol, will set legally binding national targets for emission reductions. The Kyoto process, however, is in trouble because not all countries, notably the US, will ratify it. Other efforts, such as the US movement to impose higher mileage, because not all countries, notably the US, will ratify it. Other efforts, such as the US movement to impose higher mileage standards on sport utility vehicles and the European Union plan to levy a tax on energy, have floundered. A quick and sure way to solve global warming is a range is to a quick and sure way to solve global warming is to arrange a really deep reflection, like the wonder of oil in East Europe after the break of the Soviet Empire. The disintegration resulted in あなんか、resorted. ああ、なるほど。Such disintegration resulted in shift. Resorted. Usually. This episode illustrates prosperity as a driving force behind the growing level of greenhouse gases. As income rise, people increasingly spend their money on outdoors, air conditioning, and other energy-intensive technologies, thus contributing to global warming. Rising population is another prime contributor. High population did not change since 1950s. Carbon emissions will now be 40% of their current level. Of course, the world community will not be reducing the population or striving to cap prosperity. Instead, it has focused on getting international agreement to lower emissions. The latest effort in this direction, the Kyoto Protocol, will set regularly binding national targets for emission reduction. The Kyoto process, however, is in trouble because not all countries, notably the US, will ratify it. Therefore, such as the US movement to impose higher mileage standards on sport utility vehicles and the European Union plan to levy a tax on energy have floundered. Levy 徴収する. A quick and sure way to solve global warming is to arrange a really deep depression, like the one occurred in East Europe after the breakup of the Soviet Empire. Such disintegration resulted in a steep decline in carbon dioxide emissions in the region. This episode illustrates that prosperity is a driving force behind the growing level of greenhouse gases. As income rises, people increasingly spend their money on autos, air conditioning, and other energy-intensive technology that's contributing to global warming. Rising population is another prime contributor. Higher population not changed since 1950. Carbon emissions are now be 40% of their current level. Of course, the world community will not be reducing the population, but striving to keep prosperity. Instead, it has focused on getting international agreement to lower emissions. The latest effort in this direction, the Kyoto Protocol, will set legally binding national targets for emission reduction. The Kyoto process, however, is in trouble because not all countries, notably the US, will ratify it. Other efforts, such as the US movement to impose higher mileage standards on sports utility vehicles and the European Union plan to levy a tax on energy, have floundered. A quick and sure way to slow global warming is to arrange really cheap deflation, like the one occurred in Eastern Europe after the breakup of the Soviet Empire. Such disintegration resulted in steep decline in carbon dioxide emissions in the region. This episode illustrates that prosperity is a driving force behind the growing level of greenhouse gases. As income rises, people increasingly spend their money on autos, air conditioning, and other energy-intensive technologies, thus contributing to global warming. Rising population is another prime contributor. High population not changed since 1950. Carbon emissions will now be 40% of their current level. Of course, the world community will not be reducing the population while striving to keep prosperity. Instead, it has focused on getting international agreement to lower emissions. The rise further in this direction. The Kyoto Protocol will set legally binding national targets for emission reductions. The Kyoto process, however, is in trouble because not all countries, notably the US, will ratify it. Other efforts, such as the US movement to impose high mileage standards on sport utility vehicles and the European Union plan to levy a tax on energy, have floundered. A quick and sure way to solve global warming is to arrange not really deep depression, like the one occurred in Eastern Europe after the breakup of the Soviet Empire. Such disintegration resulted in a steep decline in carbon dioxide emissions in the region. This episode illustrates that prosperity is a driving force behind the growing level in greenhouse gases. As income rises, people increasingly spend their money on other energy-intensive technologies, thus contributing to global warming. Rising population is another prime contributor. Had population not changed since 1950, carbon emissions are nearly 40% of their current level. Of course, the world community will not be reducing the population while striving to keep prosperity. Instead, it has focused on getting international agreement to lower emissions. The latest effort in this direction, the Kyoto Protocol, pursues legally binding national targets for emission reduction. The Kyoto process, however, is in trouble because not all countries, notably the US, will ratify it. Other efforts, such as the US movement to impose higher mileage standards on sport utility vehicles and the European Union plan to levy a tax on energy, have floundered. Depression, fuel breakup 崩壊、disintegration 崩壊、decline 低下、intensive 集中的な、集約的な、contributing 原因となる、貢献する、投稿する、cap 上限を設ける、striving cap 単元に上限を設けるような努力、or striving 努力 to cap prosperity 上限を設ける繁栄に、reducing と並列 will not be reducing the population 人口を減らすつもりもないし striving to cap prosperity 繁栄に上限を設ける努力をするつもりもない focus on getting international agreement to lower emissions legally binding 法的拘束力を持つwith the legally binding national target for emission reductions 法的拘束力を持つ国の、ターゲット目標 for emission reduction、排出量の低下のためのをセットするつもりだ。Notable 特に顕著に Notably the US will ratify it 批准する ratify 批准 levy 徴収する levy 徴収する取り立てる徴収する levy have floundered 孫つくもたつく How the population not change 家庭間の統治構文それわかるコントリビュータ要因一因to run the depression like the wonder of the driving force that's contributing and responding and high income rise 収入が増えるにつれ people increasingly spend their money on outdoor air conditioner and other energy intensive technology その他エネルギーを集約した技術今から使う just contributing to 並列からの最後に and があるはずなのになくなってるってことか。なるほどね。Number 18. A quick and sure way to solve global warming is to arrange a very deep depression, like the one occurred in Eastern Europe after the breakup of the Soviet Empire. Such disintegration resulted in a steep decline in carbon dioxide emission in the region. This ratio illustrates that prosperity is a driving force behind the growing level of greenhouse gases. As income rises, people increasingly spend their money on outdoor air conditioning and other energy-intensive technologies, thus contributing to global warming. Rising population is another primary contributor. How population not changed since 1950, carbon emissions will now be 40% of the current level. Of course, the world community will not be reducing the population or striving to cap prosperity. Instead, it has focused on getting international agreement to lower emissions. The latest effort in this direction, the Kyoto Protocol, is a legally binding national target for emission reduction. The Kyoto process, however, is in trouble because the neutral country, notably the US, will ratify it. Other efforts, such as the US movement to impose higher mileage standards on sport-duty vehicles and the European Union plan to levy a tax on energy, have floundered.